Hello, lovely viewers. You are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be presenting to you the summary and analysis of the play Antony and Cleopatra. This video will be centered on Act 1 of the play. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. Act 1, Scene 1. The plays open in Alexandria, in one of the rooms of Cleopatra's palace. Two of Antony's friends, Demetrius and Philo, are discussing Antony's increasing fondness for Cleopatra. Philo, in particular, is worried about this dotage that his general has for the Egyptian queen. To him, Antony's passion overflows a measure. He feels that a general's passion is best spent on a battlefield in the scaffolds of great fights. As they ponder over the general's unreasonable behavior, there is a fanfare of trumpets, and Antony and Cleopatra enter, accompanied by the queen's ladies-in-waiting and her attendant eunuchs. Philo is fearful that all this pomp and beauty has turned his general from a fierce warrior into an adult lover. Significantly, he worries that Antony, the triple pillar of the world, has been translated into a strumpet fool. Cleopatra's first words to Antony are teasing. She wants to know how much Antony loves her, and he boasts that if any love can be measured, then it is poor love indeed. There's beggary in the love that can be reckoned. But Cleopatra tantalizes him for still more compliments, more verbal proof of his love. Foolishly, he tries to appease her. They are interrupted by a messenger who has brought news from Rome, but Antony is clearly in no mood to hear or discuss military matters. All of his thoughts are now on his beloved Cleopatra, who mocks the messenger's urgency. She sarcastically jests that Caesar is probably sending yet another order to do this or do that. Take in that kingdom. Game of war bore her. She delights in equating the taking of the whole kingdom to be no more than a mere daily errand ordered by the scarce-bearded Caesar. The queen's strategy works. Antony is furious that anyone will interrupt his thoughts and his time with his beloved Cleopatra. Let Rome in the Tiber melt, he roars. The only messenger he will see is Cleopatra. His devotion to the worthy Cleopatra comprises the nobleness of life. They exit with the queen's attendants, and Demetrius and Philo are left alone to ponder over their general's transformation. Rumor has already reached Rome of Antony's romantic waywardness. Demetrius hopes that tomorrow he will once again see proof that his general is still that great property. Shakespeare does not dally with theoretical conventions of lengthy expositions. Almost immediately, we are introduced to two lovers who are clearly passionate lovers. There is only a modicum of introduction as the play opens. Briefly, two of Antony's friends discuss the general's infatuation with Cleopatra. They describe Antony as if he has undergone some strange sort of metamorphosis. It seems to them that his eyes, which once looked upon battlefield, now bend, now turn the office and devotion of their view upon towny fronts. The soldier's heart is no longer courageous. Instead, it renegates all temper and has become the bellows of fun to cool the gypsy's lust. After Antony and Cleopatra have made their utterances, it is clear that Antony has indeed let himself be seduced, body and soul, by Cleopatra's sensuality and charm. It is also clear that the Romans in general dislike Cleopatra in spite of her legendary ability to enchantment, or perhaps because of it. This prejudiced view towards Cleopatra is developed throughout the play, but as we will see, Shakespeare will not content to present her as only one-dimensional character. She is more than merely a sensual woman who happens to rule an entire country. As Antony and Cleopatra talk, both of them use exaggerated language to swear their love is greater than any other love in the world. Their love, they believe, is more than this world can hold. This is not idle overstatement, for their intense love for one another will be the cause of their deaths. Time and again in the play, this key idea will be emphasized. Love and the worlds of politics and war belong in separate spheres and can never merge. The central theme of the play is exactly that, love versus war, and Shakespeare will weave the theme in and out of the action as the play progresses. By the end of the tragedy, it will seem as if the concept of war has won. But we should not be too hasty to come to that conclusion or that decision. Upon reflection, we will see that the final act of the play is ambiguous. It is possible that love may finally be the victor after all. In this act, however, Shakespeare's emphasis is clearly on Antony's current displeasure with political matters. The messenger who has come with a letter from Rome gives Cleopatra a chance to tease Antony, and that he is dominated by Octavius Caesar, a much younger man. Her motive is to goad Antony into declaring his independence of Rome, and she succeeds, for Antony retorts that kingdoms are clay, are donkey heads alike, fixed beasts as men. Impetuously, he denies that Rome and the concerns of the political arena have any hold on him. Here, we should note his choice of words. Antony says that the earth is donkey and that the kingdoms melt like mud into the rivers of the world. This comparison is ironically striking when we consider the earthly interest for which Antony is forsaking Rome. Antony thus reveals how malleable he really is, for Cleopatra clearly delights in toying with his vacillating passions. She teases him that since he has been unfaithful to his wife by becoming involved with her, it is quite likely that he will be unfaithful to her one day. Antony, of course, vehemently denies such a speculation. Here, he is willful and self-indulgent, and he is certainly fickle. We initially see him perhaps at his worst. Later, Shakespeare's dramatic portrait of him will enlarge and will be developed in detail, stature, and complexity. As for portraying Cleopatra, the Egyptian queen, Shakespeare remains faithful to the popular image of Cleopatra as a strumpet queen, so to speak, but he suggests that she, like Antony, is more complex than one might initially suppose. On one hand, she's a coquette who manipulates Antony so skillfully that he does what she wants. On the other, she emotionally needs to have Antony to tell her how much he loves her. She needs to have him affirm for her that nothing else matters as much as their love. This clearly reveals a certain amount of insecurity on her part, and in that sense, it is quite possible that she has a genuine, if momentarily, feeling of sympathy for Antony's wife. She can see herself in the same position. That is, Antony loves her now, but she can envision losing him later to another woman. Act 1, Scene 2. This scene also takes place in Cleopatra's palace in Alexandria. Cleopatra's servants are talking to a fortune teller or a soothsayer and are trying to get him to predict how well they will fare in love. Charmaine and Iras, two of Cleopatra's attendants, and Alexis, one of her male attendants, are trying to get the soothsayer to specify their fortunes. He avoids direct answers, however, and instead predicts that Charmaine will outlive her mistress Cleopatra. Enobarbus, a friend of Antony and an officer in his army, is also present, and he interrupts the chatter of the servants when he hears someone coming. It is Cleopatra, looking for Antony. She says that Antony was merciful until a Roman thought struck him and destroyed his happy mood. Antony enters then, accompanied by a messenger, but Cleopatra and her attendants leave before he sees them. The messenger describes to Antony the outcome of a battle involving Antony's brother Lucius and Antony's wife, Fulvia, against Caesar. Lucius and Fulvia, formerly enemies, united forces in order to defeat Caesar, but failed. The messenger has more to say, but he hesitates to speak plainly. Antony assures him that he needs not to mince words and bids him to give his message, even to the point of describing Cleopatra as she is talked about in Rome. For this is why Antony thinks the messenger is hesitant. Mince not the general's tongue. Name Cleopatra as she is called in Rome. Another messenger enters to give Antony a letter, telling him that his wife, Fulvia is dead and explaining what has happened. For a moment, Antony is overcome with remorse. Enobarbus, Antony's lieutenant, enters then, and Antony tells him that they must prepare to leave for Rome. Enobarbus quips that if they leave, all the women will suffer and perhaps die from their absence. Antony, however, appears determined to forsake all of the enchantments of Egypt and return home. Enobarbus at first cannot imagine why Antony has had such a sudden change of heart, but then Antony reveals to him that Fulvia, his wife, is dead. Enobarbus looks upon the whole matter rather cynically and tells Antony not to feel so bad. After all, Antony lost a wife he didn't want, and now he has a lover whom he truly wants. He says, "This grief is crowned with consolation. Your old smoke brings forth a new petticoat." Enobarbus comments. Enobarbus' comments, however, are ill-timed, for Antony is no longer in his usual devil-may-care mood. And he does not take Fulvia's death as lightly as his earlier behavior has led Enobarbus to expect. "No more light answers," Antony says, as he refuses to let his friend treat Fulvia's death flippantly. Furthermore, this event serves to remind Antony not to neglect his duties entirely. He resolves to return to Rome and see to business. For the time being, he must give up the pleasures in Egypt. Scene 2 introduces us to the minor characters. It also includes a conversation about the nature of love. Thus, the main theme of the play remains in the foreground. The servant's witty, if somewhat cynical treatment of the subject of love contrasts considerably with the exalted declaration of love that were made in the opening scene. An additional touch of dramatic irony is added when Charmaine is exceedingly pleased with the idea that she will live longer than her mistress. Little does she realize that her mistress will soon die. Cleopatra's troubled comments about Antony's change of mood are characterized by her reference to Antony's Roman thoughts. In Elizabethan times, the term Roman was often used because it was believed that the Romans as a nation were typically serious and devoted to duty. Here, Cleopatra may be suggesting that Antony's thought was consistent with that sort of character. Another possibility is that Antony was reminded of business which had to do with Rome. That is, his thoughts were about Rome. He literally had a Roman thought. Antony's demeanor is changed upon learning about the death of his wife Fulvia. Immediately, he regrets that he once wished for her death. He sorrowfully remarked, "There's a great spirit gone." Antony's guilt to some extent appears to spur his resolve to leave Egypt and return to Rome. When Enobarbus cynically comments upon the effect that departure will have upon the woman, Antony is not amused, and in contrast with his earlier speeches, which he seemed to prepare to give up everything for the sake of love, he now seemed quite willing to do just the opposite. Antony does not fear that Cleopatra would die. "She is cunning," he says, echoing Enobarbus' comments that he has seen her die 20 times upon far poorer moments. For Shakespeare's audience, this allusion to dying possibly refers to the ecstasies of love, the moment of sexual climax which the Elizabethans often poetically liken to death. In conclusion, Scene 2 basically shows the conflicting desires that struggles for dominance within Antony. He is torn between the duties at home and his love for the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, and worse, he believes that he will never be able to reconcile these two passions. Yet he knows that ultimately, he must choose one or the other. We also see contrasted in this scene the frivolity and the sensuality of life in Egypt, as typified by the games played by the servants with the soothsayer, and in addition, we glimpse the troubled and serious world of the Romans, dominated by politics, not by love. Antony too senses the contrast, making plausible his sudden resolve to return to Rome and to more important matters. Act 1, Scene 3. This scene opens with Cleopatra instructing her attendants, Charmaine, Alexis, and Iris, to aid her in a plan. They are to find Antony and observe the sort of mood he is in. If he seems to be happy, they are to tell him that Cleopatra is ill. But if it seems to be sad or moody on the other hand, they are to tell him that she is dancing. Presumably, her purpose is to make Antony feel guilty about being away from her. She wants to make him think about her, anything to draw his attention to her. It is a transparent and childish device, more typical of an adolescent than a woman deeply in love. Antony enters and wants to tell Cleopatra the sad news of Fulvia's death. However, Cleopatra is so involved in the game that she is playing that she doesn't notice that Antony is trying to tell her something important. He keeps trying to interrupt her egotistical monologue, but he cannot manage to communicate his sorrow. First, Cleopatra feigns illness, but when she sees that Antony doesn't notice, she begins berating him for his faithlessness. After a good deal of melodramatic emotion from Cleopatra, Antony is finally able to tell her that he must leave immediately. She is caught off guard and is so distraught that he plans to leave so quickly that she accuses him of play acting. She accuses him of being false to her, as he is false to Fulvia. At this point, Antony is finally able to tell her that Fulvia is dead. This announcement, however, does not have the expected effect on Cleopatra. She merely retorts selfishly, "Now I see, Fulvia's death, how my receipt shall be." But Antony is not moved by a childish histrionics, and he repeats that he must return to Rome. Cleopatra continues to goad Antony, but to no effect. She repeats the charge that he is an excellent actor and that he plays well the role of an irritated, angry man. He answers Cleopatra that her own show of grief at his leaving might also be merely an act. She vows that her love for him is real and that her pain is as real as the pain of a woman in labor. Finally, it seems she realizes that Antony's emotions may be genuine, and she also seems to realize that the quality of love is something that a person must take on faith. When the scene ends, Cleopatra is reconciled to the fact that Antony must leave, and thus they separate and swear vows of fidelity. Act 1, Scene 4. The scene now shifts to Rome and focuses on the discussion between Antony's co-triumvirs as they discuss the problem facing the empire. Here, we have our first glimpse of Octavius Caesar and Lepidus. Although the subject of their discussion is Antony, their criticisms of him reveal a good deal about their own character. Not all of it is praiseworthy. Caesar enters, reading a letter, and is followed by Lepidus and their attendants. The two Romans catalogue Antony's faults, that is, he fishes, drinks, and wastes the lamps of night in revel. And there is heavy irony in the apparent concession that Antony's activities might be acceptable under other circumstances. That is, Caesar says, "Let's grant it is not amiss to tumble on the bed of Ptolemy, Cleopatra's former husband." Of course, Julius Caesar, Octavius's uncle, enjoyed engaging in such sexual activities. A messenger enters then with news from abroad. Pompey and two infamous pirates, Menecrates and Menas, are making the sea serve them. They have made many hot inroads into Italy, as well as creating havoc in the Mediterranean. Caesar uses this bad news as one more excuse to disparaging Antony, who is conveniently absent and cannot defend himself. As an example of Antony's character, or lack of it, Caesar recalls an incident when Antony was beaten from Modena, and not only was Antony defeated, but famine did follow. Caesar also recalls that Antony escaped with his forces to the Alps, where he did drink the stale of horses and the gilded paddle, which beasts will quaff at. Caesar is saddened. "It wounds thy honor," he says, that Antony can now act so immaturely. Caesar admonishes Antony, the absent triumvir, to leave his lascivious wassails and return to duty. He dwells on Antony's sensuality and his love for food and drink, and he hints further that Antony lacks character, for it is well known that in the difficult journey across the Alps, Antony would eat virtually anything rather than starve. Caesar cites the fact that Antony drank gilded paddle, animal urine, and browsed on or ate straight back rather than die in the feast. This act of desperation, he says, suggests that Antony is a man of ignoble taste, preferring as he does now the base pleasures of Egypt. Yet, while it is true that Antony is far more sensual and even a more self-indulgent man than Caesar, the fact that Antony could and did survive the rigors of Alpine winter attests to the fact that Antony has the prime virtues of strength and courage, regardless of whatever flaws of character that Caesar might accuse him of. Caesar, it should be noted, interprets Antony's character in the worst possible way. As a result, his attempt to turn this incident into an indictment against Antony tells us in reality more about young Caesar's insecurities than it does about Antony. In the course of this play, we shall find that although Caesar is probably the more clever of the two men, Antony has a generosity of spirit that seldom permits him to level such abuses on Caesar and his excesses. Interestingly, the scene ends as Caesar tells Lepidus that he is eager to see the two of them show ourselves on the field. He and Lepidus then pledge their loyalty to each other, echoing an earlier similar pledge between Antony and Cleopatra in the previous scene. Act 1, Scene 5. Again, we return to Alexandria. Cleopatra is in a palace with her attendants, Charmaine and Iras, and Mardian, a eunuch. Now that Antony has departed, Cleopatra is at a loss for something to occupy her time. Primarily, she spends most of her time thinking of him and worrying about what he is doing. She seems to be more like a lovesick adolescent in this scene, rather than a ruler of a great country. She asks for Mandragora, a sleeping potion, so that she can sleep out this great gap of time that Antony is away. She asks Mardian, perhaps only half-jokingly, if he has any affections or passionate feelings at all. He tells her that he does, although he can do nothing. Yet, there are acts that he thinks about fearlessly. This is a play on words to some extent, for Cleopatra may be referring to any strong emotional feeling. Although Mardian's answer is ambiguous, one gets the impression that he is conscious of both meanings, and his answer seems to hint that, although his sexual role in life is limited, he is as capable of passion and feeling as his mistress Cleopatra is. Cleopatra then turns to Charmaine and asks her to imagine what Antony is doing at this moment, how he looks, and what he is thinking. She can think of nothing that is not concerned with her love for Antony. She is about to swallow the delicious poison, her melodramatic term for the sleeping potion, when one of her servants, Alexis, enters with news of Antony. Cleopatra is delighted, and she tells Alexis that the mere fact that he has been near Antony makes him more precious in her eyes. Alexis gives the queen a pearl, a gift from Antony. It is a particularly valuable pearl, for Alexis says that Antony has kissed it. In fact, Antony has bestowed upon it many doubled kisses. In addition, Alexis says that Antony will place Cleopatra's throne with kingdoms. All the East shall call her mistress. Cleopatra then eagerly questions Alexis about Antony, how he appeared, what sort of mood he was in. She also asks Alexis whether Antony seems sad or merry, but Alexis quickly perceives that both potential responses could be wrong answers at this point. Therefore, he diplomatically says that Antony seemed neither very sad nor very happy. This seemed to satisfy Cleopatra, who would have been disturbed if Antony were distressed, but would have been more furious if he seemed too happy without her. She then gives Alexis a message to deliver to Antony. Cleopatra asks Charmaine, as proof of Cleopatra's love for Antony, if she ever saw Cleopatra love Caesar, Julius Caesar, Octavius' adoptive father, so well. Charmaine, not as clever nor astute as Alexis in gauging Cleopatra's mood, gives an answer that praises Caesar. This is a mistake. Cleopatra wants an unqualified assurance that she has never loved anyone as much as she loves Antony. She wants to hear it confirmed that every lover she had had before Antony was a mere trifle, a flirtation. Only now has Cleopatra discovered true love. In response to Charmaine's comments, Cleopatra orders her never to compare Antony to Caesar again, not even to suggest that they are equal in any way. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share this video.